What's going on, Danny? Okay. I believe you. Same here, bro.
It's in the parking
Oh,
lot.
she's
It's
fine.
in the garage.
Good, always good to see you. Okay, bro.
No wonder they said
There you go, bro.
David and
David and
Goliath.
Tara.
No.
7. Oh, there's only 6 of us today.
Yeah, Donald's not here. Donald Harrison. Hey, man. Good, good. You doing? Yes, okay. You'll be asking some questions, right? All right. Okay.
I don't think they're going to be 7.
Yeah, get Tabali over there.
Yeah, yeah. Wait, wait.
6 plus Keanna.
Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Hold on.
Oh, it squeezed me.
Oh, there he is.
You're used to counting to 4.
Yeah, right. I am. 5.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, right.
Uh-oh.
Is that any way to treat me? Whoops.
No wonder you said 8:30.
All right, let's get going. Let's get it on, man.
Wow.
7:10.
Light is bright for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really should, because I mean, my
I
eyesight.
got my jacket.
Come on, I'm just going to
You
stop.
know, when you travel, I don't want to get on a plane.
Oh, yeah.
It takes something like you.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Maloney. I work here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. Excited to have you here tonight. How many is it your very first time here at the museum? All right, very nice. Okay, so it won't be your last. Please come back and hang out with us. We offer about 120 public programs a year, all free and open to the public. I started. And we're able to do that because people like you believe in our mission to preserve, promote, and present jazz. And we're committed to providing these programs free and open to the public. If you did make a donation either on Eventbrite or when you came in, we really appreciate it. Every little bit helps. If you'd like to make a small donation on your way out or a large donation, we don't discriminate. There's a little cash box. You can do a dip jar, or I'm out there. We can take a credit card donation as well. Again, every little bit helps, and we really appreciate those of you who are able to make those donations. This collaboration with Charlie Parker Jazz Festival and Summer Stage dates back many years. In some ways, to its origins, one of our board members, Sam Turvey, was one of the founders of Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. And when that kind of came under the umbrella of the Central Park, Issa, help me out. Summer City Parks Foundation. Sorry, there we go. There's a lot of names I got to remember. City Parks Foundation. Sam came onto our board and he said, listen, this has to happen. This is a collaboration that is really important. So with the help of Uni and Issa and Erica and Priscilla, we are able to continue to offer these collaborative programs with the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. How many of you have been to Charlie Parker Jazz Festival before? Wonderful. How many are planning on going this year? Very good. It's an outstanding lineup. You'll be able to see these guys. I had the luxury of being able to hear them rehearse today. They sound amazing, so I do encourage you to check it out. Friday and Saturday here at Marcus Garvey Park, and then Sunday downtown at Tompkins Square Park. So please make sure you're checking that out. It's a great festival, again, free and open to the public. We're going to get things started. I'm going to pass it on to our moderator for the evening. You probably, if you go to jazz events in New York City over the past several years, she's a familiar face, does an incredible job leading these conversations, and is quite a a resource and a font of knowledge herself. So let's welcome, to get things started, Keanna Faircloth.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is a sold-out event, and for good reason, right? The cookers are here. Give it up. Come on now. All right, now collectively, first of all, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Keanna Faircloth. I host a podcast called Artimacy, and contributor on NPR, and just lover and appreciator of jazz. And I just want to get this out of the way that I'm really kind of nervous. I don't always get nervous, but these guys I admire so much. And sitting here talking to Mr. McBee, I'm a little bit less nervous now. But
I was more nervous talking to her. She said,
oh, thank you. But yeah, I'm really honored and delighted to be here and engage in conversation with this amazing super group. So I just wanted to get that out there and let y'all know that I'm a little jittery. Anywho, collectively, the Cookers have been together for sweet 16 years now. And they all together, I think, combined have about 250 years of experience in the jazz world. And you can find them on over 1,000 recordings. Over 1,000. They have 5 albums together themselves, including Warriors, Cast the First Stone, Believe, Time and Time Again, which was on iTunes as the Jazz CD of the Year in 2014, and The Call of the Wild and Peaceful Heart. The group consists of, from my left, Cecil McBee. Yes, wave at the people, wave at the people. George Cables. Billy Harper, David Weiss, Billy Hart, and Eddie Henderson. And I just want to jump in here and get started. At the end, we'll leave some time for questions if you guys have questions for any of them. But just to get us started here, is this still on? It sounds a little bit, okay. Just to get us started here. You know, when I think of the Cookers, I think of a really, really, really good gumbo. A really good gumbo, and of course, with that, you know, you gotta have a good roux, right? So it's not gonna be a good gumbo if the roux is not right. And you all are certainly just the sweetest, most delicious roux there is. And I kind of want to start there with sort of, you know, your origin story collectively as a group, because 4 of you were together, or not together, you kind of ran through, it's kind of the same path through the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, and I'm sure you guys have crossed paths over the years many times. But tell me how first you came together as a group, how you found each other and decided to start the Cookers. And then I want to get individually into your origin stories and how you found yourself, or how the music found you. David, you want to start?
Well, first of all, before we get into the Cookers' origin stories, their ties go further back. So I'm not going to remember all of them. Whoops.
That's a good reminder to silence our phones. Let me make sure mine is silenced.
So Billy Hart recommended George for his first Paul Jeffrey date or something like that? Was that what it was?
Something like that. I mean, Billy, well, we met at St. Peter's Church. We used to do jazz vespers when Reverend Genzel was alive. And I don't know, Billy was packing up or we weren't playing. But we started hanging out, and was it Roland Wilson?
Could have been.
That was there as well. And the next time I saw Billy was probably in my basement. We used to get together and play. A lot of guys would come out to Queens and play out there. But we played together, got to be musical and personal friends. And then the next thing you know, in that time we were playing, I was playing around playing with a band called The Substructure. That was Howard Johnson, and was it 5 tubas, believe it or not, and a rhythm section. But I got this gig because of Billy. I got a gig with Buddy Montgomery in 1968 in Indianapolis. I'm playing with Buddy and Monk Montgomery. That was, I think, the year that Wes Montgomery passed. So I got to meet Wes. Well, that was his family, his widow, and their sister Lena, and Pookie the mailman, who was also, it was eye opening for me because I was kind of brand new, out of the box. But Billy, I always tell him he's the one that got me into all this trouble. So yeah, we go back, and all of us, all of the older cookers, have relationship that go back, reach back actually to, indirectly to Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and Duke Ellington, because I got to work for Duke Ellington, rehearsing vocalists before 1968. God, I don't remember what year that was, but we kind of go back, and we have a common relationship from those days. But I know you asked about the cookers. So
No, but that
so
helps.
we'll go back to
I
that.
love it.
It's a long. Also, let me see. George is on Billy Harper's first record, Capra Black, from 1972 or 73. Eddie and Billy played together in Herbie Hancock's M1 Dishi band, and that's like, what, 1970 or so on? 70, 73. So the ties go back.
And David, you're considered one of the younger ones
Yeah,
in the Cookers, along with Donald Harrison. So how did you find your way into the group?
well, the origins of the band were, I started it. It came from my working with Freddie Hubbard. And there was a club in Brooklyn called the Up Over Jazz Cafe, which was it was a nice, modest club. But if I remember the story right, the owner of the club, the first concert he went to as a child, when he was like 8 or 9 years old, was the original Night of the Cookers concert in Brooklyn in 1960, whatever it was. And because I was working with Freddie Hubbard, he called me up every year. This part I didn't know. The Night of the Cookers concert was also in April, around Freddie's birthday, which was April 7th.
7th.
So every year he's like, let's bring Freddie out. Let's do a Night of the Cookers celebration. But Freddie lived in L.A. And somehow it didn't work out. I mean, there was a few different adventures. And finally one year he said, like, let's just get all the Night of the Cookers alumni together and do a show and, get the music together. So I called Pete LaRocca and James Spaulding, and Howard Mayburn couldn't do it, I guess. So we called more Freddie Hubbard alumni. We called Ronnie Matthews and Keanna Zawadi and Larry Ridley. And we did a couple of nights, like a Night of the Cookers celebration in Brooklyn. And James Spaulding and Pete LaRocca sounded amazing. They were playing the Night of the Cookers records during the break, and I was like, oh yeah, sounds like they still sounded great. We're more refined and better over the years. So that was the original idea, like, okay, let's do a few more of these Night of the Cookers thing. So, basically got James Spaulding and Pete LaRocca, and depending on the gig, sometimes George did it, sometimes Eddie did it. And then at a certain point, I was like, well, this is a lot of fun, but it really needs to be original music if it's going to be a band. You need original music. You need something to grow with. And at the time, I also started working with the Charles Tolliver Big Band and met Billy Harper there. So then my idea was like to take that thing and bring in Charles Tolliver and Billy Harper and their compositions. And then I thought I had the penultimate band. And it didn't exactly work out like that. A few more personnel changes, and then in 2007 we had a festival in California that it was this band plus Craig Handy on alto saxophone, and it clicked, and we were doing George's tunes and Billy's tunes and Cecil's tunes, and it just clicked. I was like, okay, let's do this, and here it is, 16 years later, and we're
Wow.
still trying.
Amazing.
And I think it's 7 records by now, 6 records, 1 on the way.
6. Oh, one on the way.
We did
When
one
do
during
we-
COVID, one called Look Out. And
Right.
now we have a live record in the can.
Oh, a live record. When is that coming out? Can you tell us?
I think February now. Sometimes these sometimes these
we'll look
people
for it.
sometimes these people lie to you. So last I heard it was February, but I think they said something else before.
Okay. Well, we'll look for it at the top of 2024.
June. I think they said June. June happened already, right? So I'm not believing them on that one.
Okay. Okay. Well, in 2024 sometime.
Let's go with that.
All right. So I want to kind of get into how you all found yourself in the music, or would you say that it found you? Because a lot of times folks have, a different perspective on how you found yourself in jazz. Whoever wants to start.
Cecil finds himself the best.
I found myself first playing a clarinet, and it sounded just like that. No, I'm born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what was it? Yeah, and I'm surprised that I can remember this far back. Just as I was about to leave elementary school, this person put my class into this room where, on a couple of tables there were several instruments of all makes and all kinds, and we were asked to play or choose one that you would like, and you might be in the band once you would arrive at middle school. So I chose the clarinet. And really, it was amazing. I don't know why I chose that thing. And I don't remember even playing it until about my 9th year, because at that time, you're just emerging as, life is becoming sort of a reality to you. But turns out, just before high school, I had developed a reputation of being a clarinet player because of what I did. So to make it short, I'm in high school, and I'm now at band practice, and there was this big band. I'm brand new, and I'm sitting next to the finest clarinetist that Tulsa has ever produced. His name was Ernie Fields Jr. He was the son of a big band leader out of the Southwest there, whose name was Ernie Fields, that made a lot of important contributions to this music we call jazz. And Ernie refused to acknowledge my presence, period, and mind you, this is first year, and I'm second year, and there are like 4 or 5 other folks. And so Mr. Fields, the band director, who was Ernie's uncle, says, Ernie, I wanted you to play something, letter B, and let people hear what that sounds like, and then the band will continue. So he brought his hand down, ready, 1, 2, and this I've never heard a person sound so bad in all my life. Awful, it was squeaking, and I said, hey man, I got it made here. So he was going to graduate, and I was going to take his spot. And so he said, Ernie, try it again. And it was even worse. So I began, I said, and Miss Phil said, Ben, by the way, this is Cecil McBee. He is glad to be here. He's really happy to be in the band. He's going to take Ernie's place. And we're going to have Cecil play this. Cecil, letter B, second beat of that measure, I'm sure you could do that. So he brought his hand out. And I started fumbling. I couldn't do it myself. I couldn't play. Turns out this guy had heard me play, and he knew that I really wasn't mature enough to acknowledge anything on that paper except make a sound on the instrument. Point is, that's when I discovered, as well as my band director, discovered that I could not read music. I had gone through middle school, and I'm now a sophomore in high school, and I'm playing all of these parts by memory, unable to read the music. So Mr. Fields, after that band practice, took me by my ear, so to speak, said, you're going to take lessons. So I really, became increasingly aware of my responsibilities as a young musician at the time, only to discover when, in my junior year, I'm putting my clarinet away into the compartment at the band practice as usual. On the floor was this big instrument that I had been kind of like reaching over at every turn of, putting my instrument up. I picked it up. It was a bass fiddle made out of aluminum. I played a note. That's how I discovered the bass.
Wow.
And I really enjoyed the sound because I had heard, a couple of things in passing, in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the home of Oscar Pettiford, Roy Eldridge, you name it. And what am I trying to say here? So, oh yeah. I've convinced my buddies that I can play a few notes that made some kind of sense insofar as, being appreciated or in terms of what I thought I would be able to express having heard somebody play. And so we would meet maybe once or twice a week, and we would jam in this, the same room that I discovered the bass. When one evening, I'm trying to say, somebody knocked on the door. And because we kept the door closed, because we didn't want to disturb anybody else, opened the door, and there was this little guy dressed in a plaid coat, long black shoes, gold tooth, hair was slicked back. And I've never seen anybody that sharp. I mean, this guy was decked out. And he asked for Cecil McBee. And I said, and my buddy said, he says, is Cecil McBee here? I heard one of my buddies say, hey man, that's Jimmy Cry Cry. That's Jimmy Cry Cry. He asked me for Cecil McBee. I said, I'm Cecil McBee. He says, you play the bass, boy? I said, yeah, I can play a little bit. He said, well, I got a band. I want you to meet me tomorrow night at the lounge across the street from the drugstore over there, and we could play some music. So that's how I got started.
Wow, that's interesting. So you think we'll get a clarinet record
And
one
I
day?
could go on and on and on. I could go on and on and on. But the interesting thing is, before I let these guys speak, because I'm really not much of a talker.
You can't tell.
The interesting thing is that from clarinet to bass that was quite a transition. To this day, I don't quite understand how that transition took place to place me in a position of quality of expression. But to play the bass, you've got to be able to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And playing a clarinet, you're playing a lot of melodies. So how did I make the transition? I have no idea. But again, during a rehearsal, Jimmy Cry Cry. This is the Jimmy Cry Cry. We're rehearsing with Jimmy Cry Cry. Jimmy Cry Cry was one who, if you think James Brown was really something, you should hear this guy. This was before James Brown. Right? Jimmy Cry Cry, the guy in the apparel that I spoke about, would literally stand on his head and cry, cry, while he's holding the mic, he's sustaining himself, supporting himself with his right hand, and he's crying on the mic upside down, asking his baby to come back. Now, I played with this guy for about 3 or 4 months when we were rehearsing at the Flamingo Club, and this guy, whose name is Red Prysock, walked in and asked for Cecil McBee. The word had gotten out in the city that I was a bass player, right? And so he said, you know, how long you been playing? I said, about 1.5 years. This was the Red Prysock. Anybody ever heard of Red Prysock? Red Prysock was one of the prominent tenor saxophone players at that particular time, that I had no idea who this guy was about, or, you know, even what jazz was about. He says, look, my bass player could not join me here from New York. He says, would you like to play in my band? So I ended up playing in his band. That's how my career got started.
Wow.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is I knew nothing about how to play a note, 1, 2, 3, but I must have been doing something right, because Jimmy wanted me and he wanted me. And when I began my first performances at a place called Clarence Love's Lounge throughout my high school year, you know, that's when I kind of, you know, picked up on what was going on and became a musician from that point on.
Wow, what an amazing story. And honestly, it seems like the bass came more natural to you than the clarinet. So I think that's an awesome example of it finding you, because had you not been reaching over that bass every day.
Well, I like to say to younger musicians that might be inspired by what I do, that, you know, a lot of the times the instrument chooses you. You know, as I chose the clarinet off that table, you know, that the bass was on the floor when I put my clarinet away. He said, play me.
Yeah.
The greatest thing that could have happened to me, because here I am, right before you.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you for your patience.
Yes. That was a priceless story. And Mr. George Cables, now, I heard that you didn't start out in jazz. You started out in classical music.
I wasn't playing jazz. I didn't know anything about jazz, but I'm from New York. I was born in Brooklyn. So I was living in Queens, and I got to go when I went to high school. I went to the High School of Performing Arts, which
Fame.
is the
All right.
LaGuardia School now. And that was one of the greatest things that happened to me, because, I mean, it was a great environment. It's the only school I ever went to that at the end of the year, people would cry people were so sad, didn't believe, and people were so eager to get back in September. You couldn't wait to get back because, all the kids were from all boroughs, from every borough in New York, including Staten Island. I mean, people would take the ferry to get there. And it was not a big school. It was 650 students in the whole school. And later, in my senior year, the school merged with music and art. I mean, we had a relationship with them. We became an annex of Music and Art High School, which was uptown, like on 135th Street, I think. But at this school, I made friends with, there were two guys, Richard Maldonado and Larry Fishkin. Larry played the tuba, and he knew a lot about the music. He would tell me about Ray Draper. I don't know if you guys know who Ray Draper was. He was a tuba player who also went to performing arts. I think they separated him from the school for some reason. But Richie, who became Ricardo Rey, really great Latin player, one of the Fania All-Stars, I think, as well. Richie, they kind of turned me on to jazz. I remember when Dave Brubeck's Take 5 came out, that was important. Art Blakey's Drum Suite, I had that. And Larry turned me on to Thelonious Monk. We had Thelonious Monk's Town Hall concert record. So these three things really got me interested in music. And I was interested in this music because, I was playing classical music then, but this was, came out of a black experience. It was art music, and it was something that you really felt free, could feel free in expressing yourself because it involved improvisation and really putting yourself, you became the co-composer. I mean, of course, all those realizations came a little later, but Richie would, I asked him, well, how do you improvise? And he told me, a great definition. It was not complicated, telling me about mixolydian modes or this or that or the other. So you take the change, you take the chords of the song and the form of the song, and you improvise on it with the chords. Okay, I can understand that. That's great. I could see the big picture. And listening to them, because like you said, I really wasn't into jazz, and I've always felt like I was playing catch-up. So I would listen as much as I could to what they would tell me and to the music that I could hear. And also, this is New York City. So on my prom night, I went to the Hickory House, and after the prom, we went to the Hickory House and to the Jazz Gallery, where Pony Poindexter, Lambert Hendricks, and Bavon, that was after Annie Ross left, and Ornette Coleman were there. I don't know if my ears were ready for everybody, but then we went up to the Hickory House where Marion McPartland was, and the guy said, "Well, we can serve you guys, but the girls, wink and a nod, and because we were 17." I mean, I was 17. That was in those days, the legal age was 18 in New York. So later, when I became 18, when I turned 18, I could go. I found myself at the 5 spot a lot because Thelonious Monk was there for months. I mean, months. And it was a double bill, Thelonious Monk and Mose Allison would probably play opposite him. And Charlie Mingus, if Monk was in it, Charlie Mingus's band. It's the first time and the only time I got to see Eric Dolphy. And Mal Waldron would be playing opposite him. And then you'd see guys would walk in. I saw Coleman Hawkins and Rahsaan Roland Kirk before he was Rahsaan. And some guy came in, you know, he just kind of looked a little scruffy. He came up, picked up the bass, and sat in and played. And I became discouraged. I said, man, everybody around here plays something. But that was Wilbur Ware, you know, who came in and played. But it was a real community. But seeing Thelonious Monk, hearing Thelonious Monk on records is great. But seeing the music, seeing people play the music, watching the music being played, and hearing it is, to me, was just indescribable. That was what made me want to be, or to play the music, and not just, I didn't want to be have a piano trio, play solo piano. I just wanted to be a part of the music. If I could just be a part of the band, any band, that would be great. So in my neighborhood, these guys were playing in the church basement, and I heard them and said, wow, they sound like real jazz musicians. They were my age. Billy Cobham was playing the drums. He went to music and art. There's a guy named Artie Simmons who played the trombone and drums. And anyway, we got together. It was Leroy Barton, whose father was, I think, the first black union official at Local 802, and helped us get our union cards. And a guy named Bernard Scavella, who later went to Chicago and became a pharmacist and still plays. So later on, Clint Houston, I don't know if anybody, he died as relatively young. But we all got together and we formed a band called the Jazz Samaritans. Like, we were good guys. So we were out in Queens and Eastern Springfield Gardens and Laurelton, and we used to play in a basement. And Roy Haynes was Artie's cousin, uncle, nephew. I don't remember which, but he was related. And he would come down and check us out. I think he was really just checking out Billy and Artie. But he would stop and listen to us, and then he would sit in and give us a thrill. And that was just amazing. So at any rate, a gentleman named Jim Harrison, I don't know if you know who he was. He used to produce concerts around. And he was aware of us. He would hear us play. But during this time, Vietnam was happening, and Billy had to go into the Army. I escaped from that fate. But Billy, Lenny White was also in that neighborhood. So he didn't join the band, but he became part of that community. So we'd be in my basement. I used to meet more people in my basement. I mean, from all over, because people would come over from different parts of the city to come in the basement and jam. And so Lenny and Clint and me, we became a rhythm section. And we used to play. Jim Harrison used to hire us to do gigs here at Slugs on Saturday afternoon, and maybe somewhere out in Westbury we'd do something. And one of these days, we did something. We were backing up Woody Shaw and Booker Irvin, and we were thrilled, you know. But Woody really liked us, so he got us a gig. Lenny, I think, maybe the two of us with Jackie McLean, and somewhere else in Slugs. And maybe a month later, he called me and said, you know, Art Blakey's going to change his band, so why don't you come on and we'll be at Slugs. So I just showed up, and this fellow, who I used to see all the time with Art Blakey, was in the band, and Woody and Art, and Buster Williams was playing bass with that band, and we started playing, and that was the beginning. And that night, I got to say, we were playing, and and it was one of those nights. Art Blakey could be, wasn't usually known for being on time all the time. So this night, Art Blakey was started 9:30 on the dot, and we were playing, and I happened to look around, and the old band came. Do you remember this? The old band came in because he didn't tell them he was changing the band. So I looked,
awkward.
and I could see daggers coming, towards me. And I'm saying to myself, I don't care what happens. I'm not leaving this bandstand. If I have to stay here all night.
So who did you replace?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it was Ronnie. Ronnie Matthews, and it was Julian Priest who was in that band.
Yeah, Slide was around too.
Sly. Yeah, because all I know is I'm not leaving. So at the end of the everything was all right, but at the end of the night, I didn't feel like I acquitted myself as the way I wanted to, so I was playing the piano. And Billy, who likes to play the drums, he jumped up on the drums and started playing a little bit. So Art Blakey said, listen, George, you don't have to prove anything. You're a messenger now.
Wow.
So
That's amazing.
you couldn't have said anything any better than that. So that's basically how I got into this. mess.
Amazing. All right. Harp from Texas.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I hear you started a quintet at 14? Were you 14 years old when you started?
Well, I started. I
You
was
were
singing
quintet?
first. I was
You were
gonna
singing
sing,
first?
and then I got the horn at about 11 or 12,
Wow.
and got interested in. Well, I played in the marching band. And the big thing there in the South at the time was competitions, bands against bands. You know, this high school band against this high school band, and the bands had to. They didn't have to, but they competed, and everybody was always looking to see, okay, what's the best band? But usually, the best band was with the best football team.
Right. That makes sense.
So, yeah, in the South, it seemed like more of a football kind of place. But there are a lot of musicians. There are a lot of straight musicians who come from there, and they leave, which is what I learned to do. So here I am in New York, and it seemed that it was always interesting when I'd go to these clubs and hear somebody, because these were names that I heard on records. You know, I mean, I'd hear some famous name, and from the record, I would go check them out, see who's on the record, and then go check them out, and then that way I got to see all the people that I liked. I liked so many of the. Well, the jazz thing was fairly different and new. It always seems new, doesn't it? Fairly different and new. And it's been around a long time, but I was just not so familiar with it. I was into marching band. But I had to get away from that. But within the marching band, we got a jazz group. And then I was able to get a little closer to the jazz. But I think I said I was going to sing. I was mainly going to sing. And I passed the instrument shop, and I would see these instruments, and I saw something with a lot of notes. And I saw one with 3 notes. I said, that's not enough. I didn't know what that was. So it turned out to be a trumpet, okay. But
Nobody wants to play trumpet.
right. I had to get the one with all those notes, and I wanted the guy called me in the shop and introduced me to the instrument. He said, this is saxophone and so and so and so and so and so. So then from that time I wanted a saxophone and a horse. Yeah, I was into horses. I mean, I loved horses. Of course, I was little, and then when I got to when I was in the country, and a relative came galloping on a horse and came close, I was scared. I was whoa! I thought I was a horseman. I love horse. I like the way they look or something.
Yeah.
And galloping. But yeah, I was scared of that horse. He was big, man. I mean, big. I said, whoa. But I guess I was just small.
Yeah, I went through a lot of that in Oklahoma.
Yeah. But eventually I got myself together and kept playing in the band, and then I stopped singing. Have you heard of Johnny Nash? Johnny Nash. Johnny Nash was the main singer in the high school, and I was the main singer in the junior high. Yeah. So I was really gonna sing. But then, I saw the instrument in the shop, and the guy told me about it. So when I wanted a horse and a horn, I finally got the horn at Christmas. And from then on, I was into the horn. And I've played, wow. Well, even in Houston, I was around a lot of big, good names and good musicians, and I didn't know they were good. Ornette Cobb, and a whole lot of guys. I didn't know. Well, I was too young, I guess, to be in the clubs and know what was happening.
Yeah.
But I was always around them. They were around me, and when I started playing, it was easy for them to pull me in and get me to play, or try to play, or whatever. But I developed and got this idea in my head that after listening to all these records and things, I gotta go to New York. I gotta get to New York. And sure enough, after graduating from college, just one day I jumped up and said, I'm going. And I came on up to New York. I had a car and everything. And when I got up here, everybody didn't like me because I had a car. But, there's a whole lot to the story.
Yeah. The rest is history, I guess.
Who was your first gig with?
Well, let's see. It wasn't, the first real gig was with Art Blakey. I played with some guys who were freelancing,
Yeah.
Where did Art first hear you?
Where did he?
First hear you?
He heard about me. He said, he called me and said, hey, Billy. That's the way Blakey talked. I hear you play. Why don't you come on down to the club and sit in? Oh yeah, okay. And since the word had spread or something about me, and by the time when I played, that was it. And I was happy. I was in the group. Yeah.
Wow. So we're going to get a vocal record from Hart and a clarinet record from Mr. McBee here.
Well, yeah, like
Duets.
Yeah, I was right behind Johnny Nash, sort of.
I want to hear it.
I'm gonna sing to you sometime.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold you to it. All right. David, tell us how you got started.
I have to follow this.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say my experience was a little different. I grew up in Queens. I grew up in New York, actually, and but I was a rock and roll kid. There was absolutely no jazz in my life whatsoever. My neighborhood was denim jackets and patches and Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith, and I guess I was really into music, and it evolved. It evolved from rock and roll to more progressive rock, I guess, to fusion. Fusion was pretty big at the time. as I was old enough to start going to concerts at like 12 or 13. I remember seeing Billy Cobham, George Duke. I saw Tony Williams' Lifetime, and Jan Hammer and Al Di Meola. That was music. And my friends were all going in from Queens to CBGB's at night. But when you walked to CBGB's, there was a club on the corner called the Tin Palace, and it got my attention. I went in a few times, and I think I saw Billy Bang, and so it was there, but it was never a passion. But I started getting more into avant-garde jazz, and but I was also a photographer, and I went to art school. That didn't work, and then I went to this place called the Creative Music Studio, which was in Woodstock, led by this guy Carl Berger. Now it's more of an avant-garde place. There was a trumpet player there that was really good. I played trumpet in high school, but I played piano too, and I played in like underground, like garage band, rock bands with this. I had a little synthesizer and stuff. But when I was at the Creative Music Studio, there was a slightly older trumpet player who was very good, very developed. And I said, well, where did you go to school? And he said, North Texas State University. And what he didn't add was, but there was nobody else like me there. Because he was more of a free jazz player, and there's absolutely none of that at North Texas State. But while I was also at the Creative Music Studio, like I said, most of the teachers were more avant-garde players, but a couple of people who lived up there came by, and Jimmy Jufrey came by once a week. And he took me aside one day, like, you have some good instincts, you have good this, but, you really need, learn harmony, melodies and stuff like that. And so between the two of those, I did wind up applying to North Texas State. But in the interim, I bought a book called 28 Great Trumpet Solos or something like that had Freddie Hubbard solos and stuff like that. And being around the avant-garde guys, I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy. And I bought a Freddie. So I bought the records that the solos were on. And that's the first time I bought Freddie Hubbard records and Kenny Dorham records and stuff like that. Bought the record, put it on, looked at the solos. Okay, this is going to be easy. And then, oh, shit. I can't. Good thing I'm going to school now. And I think we've compared North Texas State experiences before, and those were a little different too. But I got it together. I'd still visit New York on breaks, and Art Blakey's band at the time had Terrence Blanchard and Donald Harrison, and they played 2 weeks in Christmas, and so I was getting more and more exposed to the music. Moved back to New York, ready to go, and Terrence Blanchard and guys like that were the guy. Wynton Marsalis was coming up too, but for whatever reason, Terrence Blanchard was the guy for me. But you know what? He was never very nice to me. I'd be like, hi, I really like your, yeah, whatever, But I started going to jam sessions, and some of the older guys were just wonderful to me. Bill Hardman and Tommy Turrentine, and these guys took me in, and I would practice with them and study with them. And it gave me a lot more history and a lot more grounding. And I think through all of this, I always felt like I was playing catch-up because I started late. But like I said, those guys were wonderful, and that seemed to be the gateway to everything. Mostly, yeah, Bill Hardman took me in the back of the Vanguard once. He and introduced me to Art Blakey and put his arm around me and said, Boo, this is your next trumpet player. And Boo said, oh, really? And I said, no, he's just kidding, But I saw him later that night at Bradley's, and he's like, what's wrong? You scared? I'm like, yeah, I'm scared. But he did the same thing. He told me to come to a gig, but 50 other people were there. But I was always in that atmosphere, always, like I said, feeling the need to catch up, and, eventually some other opportunities came along. And I guess here we are.
That must have been full circle, though, when you started out just studying Freddie Hubbard solos, and then you ended up playing with them.
The funny thing is, it's not funny to anybody else probably, but I read an article. When I first started playing jazz trumpet for real, Miles Davis obviously, was my hero. And I remember reading an article in Downbeat or one of the magazines where Miles Davis said, oh, Freddie Hubbard, he just plays a bunch of eighth notes. And I was like, okay, he just plays a bunch of eighth notes. And when I was in college, my college classmates was Jim Rotundi, who was all Freddie Hubbard. And I'd be like, no, he just plays eighth notes. So when I got the gig with Freddie, he was kind of like, the irony is you never really, it's like, well, I'm learning, I'm getting it. But it took me, in the end, I mean, as powerful of a trumpet player as Freddie was, my early influences were Miles Davis, Kenny Dorham, and Lee Morgan.
Yeah.
Freddie came later. Maybe some of it was because, I mean, Freddie was just so good, I just couldn't do it, or, whatever my tastes were, the harmonic stuff I got from Kenny Dorham. But Freddie said he got a lot of stuff from Kenny Dorham, too.
Oh,
So.
wow, interesting. Speaking of, we could go on all day here.
Yeah,
we
I really-
were all night
Oh, yeah.
because you mentioned Lee Morgan, and I'm like, I know you were in Lee Morgan's
he got
last
that,
band,
yeah.
which I really want to get into right now. But
Well, even
I'll let
even
y'all
with all
ask
that
that during the
explanation, I still
Q&A.
have no idea how I got
yeah,
here.
yeah. No, I mean, it was obviously meant to be. You're the founder of the Cookers. I mean, you went the path and the direction you were supposed to go in. So,
Like I said, I still really don't know how, but here.
yeah. Now, Mr. Billy Hart, NEA Jazz Master.
Oh.
Billy Hart. He's shaking his head. You're so humble. But it just warms my heart to know that you're from my hometown, Washington, D.C. Same neighborhood, Deanwood, and Howard University alum as well. And, oh, my goodness, I'm just really honored to have you here. And I want to hear all about how you got started in D.C., in Northeast D.C., that is.
I was gonna let you talk to Eddie.
You want to pass the mic? No, it's your turn.
Okay. Well, Deanwood. First of all, Washington, D.C. had a lot of great musicians. I mean,
Something in the water.
you could start with Duke Ellington, Dr. Billy Taylor, and a lot of great drummers and a lot of great, just a lot of great musicians, period. And my grandmother, who lived with us, was a concert pianist. So I was around a little music, listening to her and watching her. And eventually, then I had two grandmothers. So my father's mother was a concert pianist, but my mother's mother didn't live with us. So I went to visit her one time, and I got there before she got there. And so this lady came out in the hall and said, "What are you doing loitering in the hall?" And I said, "Well, I'm waiting for my grandmother." So she said, "Well, you can't stay here. We don't want you loitering in our halls." He said, "So you can come and wait for your grandmother in here." So I think I had some drumsticks in my back pocket. So when her husband came home, I didn't know who he was, of course, and he was the best saxophone player in town. And so he was changing his listening apparatus from 78 records to 33 records. So he gave me 2 of the 78 records, and they were both Charlie Parker records. And that's how I began to learn about music, maybe because of my grandmother, I was able to listen on a high level or something like that. And I can tell you story after story, but I just went on and on until I could, till I could get better. Yeah. And so at a certain point, I found out there were live musicians in town, and I tried to play with them, and they wouldn't. They thought it was a joke because I was so young. So I've called this guy that I had met next door to my grandmother's, and I said, "They won't let me play." He said, "Well, okay, you can come down and sit in on my gig. That's when I found out he had a gig. And
What was his name?
Roger Buck Hill.
Oh my goodness, Buck Hill.
So I came down, and I did okay, I guess, first couple of tunes. But then the next tune, I butchered the next tune, and I didn't know anyone, so I tried to walk over in the corner where I could lick my wounds by myself. But somebody grabbed me by the loops on my pants and said, it wasn't all your fault. It takes 3 of us to make a rhythm section. So when I looked around, it was this lady that grabbed me, and it turned out she was the pianist. And when I found out later, that was how I met Shirley Horn. So between Buck and Shirley,
Yes.
I got started. So then I played for some time with Buck, and then I started playing with Shirley. And one of the trips or tours that I did with Shirley, we drove from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. And then on a couple of days off, I went down to hear the Jazz Messengers in a club down the street. But I got a call at the club, and the call was from Jimmy Smith, the organist. But I also got a call at the hotel from James Brown.
Wow.
But I saw, I saw Jimmy Smith first, so I left Shirley and went to Chicago to join Jimmy Smith, and we left Chicago and went to Paris, and then I stayed in Jimmy's band for 3.5 years. Wow. And then when I left him, I went with Wes Montgomery, and then Wes died, and when Wes died, then I went with Eddie Harris, the saxophonist. Mm-hmm. And when I left Eddie Harris, I went with Pharoah Saunders. Wow. And when I left Pharoah Saunders, I went with Herbie Hancock. Yes. And when I left Herbie Hancock, I went with McCoy Tyner.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And
wow.
And then when I left McCoy Tyner, I went with Stan Getz. And around that time, I began to, because I had just moved to New York, that's when I met you, because I just moved. And then while I was with Jimmy Smith, I'd heard about Billy Harper in Texas. So when I found out that Billy Harper was living in New York, I looked for him. Mm-hmm. And some kind of way, I don't remember how it worked out, but I ended up getting a chance to play with you. Yeah. And it's gone on till now like that. Yeah. And some kind of way, I've ended up in the Cookers.
Uh-huh. That's so cool, man. And to think it started with Buck Hill, the sax playing mailman,
Yeah.
because he was a mailman during the day, and
yeah, he was a great player.
absolutely.
There's a big mural
Yes.
of him on the building down there,
Mm-hmm.
which how big? It's at least as big as this wall, right?
Yeah, definitely.
One of those.
So you must know Shirley Horn's nephew, Warren Shad, then.
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
we played one or
He's
two
also
of
a
his
drummer.
pianos.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of history in D.C.
Well, what was it? Quaco, Sumbry.
Yeah,
So
the next generation.
Well, yeah, I'm interested in what keeps coming up.
Yeah, and we'll get to that too. And last but not least, Mr. Eddie Henderson, if you could tell us, and then after which I want to kind of get into the connections to Charlie Parker, which you sort of touched on, Mr. Hart. But first, Eddie Henderson, how tell us your origin story.
Okay, well, the way I got into music is a similar journey to all the stories that you've heard thus far. I came from a musical family. My mother and father were both in show business, and I think everybody here have seen the iconic movie of videotape of Fats Waller singing with a pretty lady sitting on the piano singing "Ain't Misbehaving to Him." Well, that was my mother.
Wow.
And thank you. Well, she had an identical twin. They were called the Brown twins, and they were in about 17 of Fats Waller's videos. And my mother's best friend was Lena Horne, and her roommate in the Cotton Club was Billie Holiday. So my mother knew everybody in show business. So when I was in the 5th grade in elementary school here in the Bronx, here in New York, they had a musical aptitude test to see who had musical ability. And I passed, and my best friend Larry Katz, he passed too. And so they were going to give us all instruments. So my man, Larry Katz, you know, he got a clarinet, just like Cecil started on. So of course, that's my man. I wanted a clarinet too. But they ran out of clarinets, right? So all they had left was the accordion and violin. I said, oh, no. No. So my mother's brother, my mother was a dancer in the original Cotton Club, and her brother, Uncle Louie, he had a trumpet that he was going to give me, but before he could give it to me, Sarah Vaughan and my mother, when I was 9 years old, took me to the Apollo Theater to hear Louis Armstrong. I can see it just like I'm there right now. We're sitting in the box seats, and I think Lucky Millender's big band was playing, and I could see Louis Armstrong behind the curtain warming up behind the curtain while they were playing. I could hear his sound over and above the big band. He was just warming up. I thought to myself, damn, he's got a big sound, you know. So at the end of the gig, you know, my mother took me backstage to introduce me to Louis Armstrong. And so on his mouthpiece and I never played the trumpet before in my life. He showed me how to make a sound on his horn. But of course, I'm just about this big, 9 years old. I had no idea who he was. I said, who's this cat, Mommy? You know. And so she says, anyway, went home, and Uncle Louie, he gave me his trumpet. Oh my God. And I took lessons. I was very diligent practicing trumpet from a very good teacher in elementary school. So that my mother took me back a year later, and I learned how to play Flight of the Bumblebee. So we went backstage to see Louis Armstrong at the Apollo Theater. Satchmo said, hey, little Eddie. Little Eddie. You still playing? I said, yeah, man, give me a horn, you know. So I said, diddle-doo, diddle-doo. I remember he screamed and kind of fell off the chair, said, what's his wife's name? Louise?
Lucille.
Lucille, give me that book of 10 of my solos transcribed. And I have it at home somewhere. It says, to little Eddie, you sound good. This is to warm your chops up by. Keep playing. Love, Satchmo. Wow. That was the beginning. But I was so immature, I had no idea what stature he held in the world. So I went home. I kept practicing and practicing. My parents moved to San Francisco, and every week I studied at classical music. I wasn't really into jazz yet. The light had not come on yet. I studied classical music at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And then when I was a junior in high school, my stepfather, he was the doctor to all the famous jazz musicians that came through San Francisco, like John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Miles Davis. So guess who was staying at the house for 2 weeks when I came home from high school, from my trumpet lesson? Miles Davis, right? He took me hand in hand in his car to a club called the Black Hawk in San Francisco. In his band was Cannonball Adderley, John Coltrane, Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, and Philly Joe Jones. From the first note, the light went on in my head. I said, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, you know.
Is that where
And
the
then
Black
as
Hawk
time-
recordings came out of that gig? The Black Hawk recordings with Miles?
I'm sorry, what?
Did those Black Hawk recordings,
Recordings.
Well,
were
no,
they
this
those
was
dates?
Before
Those are
that
later.
recording.
Oh, okay.
Because on the recording was Hank Mobley.
Okay.
But the year before that, you had John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley in the band. So, you know, here I was so impressed by Miles Davis. So every time Miles would come to town, he'd stay at the house, and I'd play with his records. So my parents wanted me to play for him. I put on the record and play with the record. You know, Miles Davis' voice like that, right? He said, Eddie, you sound good, but that's me. I said, oh, Lord, back to the drawing board. So as time and events on, I went on ahead and, because my stepfather wanted me a doctor, so I went in medical school, but music began to be more important. So I was in medical school in Washington, D.C. Every weekend, I'd drive up to New York, and I was following Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard like a little puppy dog at all their gigs. And lo and behold, one of the gigs I took Freddie Hubbard to was the original Night of the Cookers, which this band was derived from. And so I kept, you know, first I wanted to play like Miles, then I wanted to play like Freddie Hubbard, then I wanted to play like Booker Little, then I wanted to play like Lee Morgan. So a little bit of each one, I hope, rubbed off on me. And then after I finished medical school, lo and behold, Herbie Hancock comes through town. I thought I was just going to practice medicine during the day and play at night. Well, Johnny Coles, the Herbie regular trumpet player, was on a sabbatical with Ray Charles, and Herbie needed a trumpet player. And Herbie, somebody recommended me, so Herbie said, oh, no, he's a doctor. So I said, I said, just give me one chance. So he gave me that first 1 week, the first week just as an experiment, because there was nobody else. Billy Hart was in the band. They left town, and I was still in San Francisco. I was heartbroken. I had never played with people on that level. And so I told Billy, well, you all are leaving. What am I going to do, you know? He says, well, you know, propose to Herbie. So I said, well, Herbie, you know, I'd really, you know, this is beyond my wildest dream. I would really love to be in the band. It took about this long. Herbie said, okay. Just like that, it changed the whole trajectory of my life. From that point on, that's when the M1 band started. It was Billy Hart, Buster Williams, Herbie Hancock, Betty Maupin, and myself. And behind that, from the time I quit being a doctor, moved back to but you know, I still have my license and everything, moved back to New York. Then guess who started to call? Art Blakey wanted to joined his, after Herbie's group broke up, I became a jazz messenger. McCoy Tyner called me, Elvin Jones, Max Roach, Jackie McLean, and on and on. And up to the present tense. Now the circle is complete. I'm back with the Cookers.
Wow. Dr. Trumpet. That's what we should call you, Dr. Trumpet. But what happened to your patients? They're still waiting on you? Oh, my goodness. So I wanted to kind of get back because, of course, we're in the 31st year of the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival. And just to make connections there, you mentioned, Mr. Hart, how Mr. Roger Buck Hill gave you those 78s
Right.
of Charlie Parker. And I'm sure that sort of changed your life in a way. I wanted to kind of,
definitely
yeah,
changed
tell
my
us.
life. Well, I couldn't stop listening to those records. I mean, I literally could not stop listening to them. And it's funny because I loved pop music. Well, you know, I was a young kid. I used to whistle or sing the records on my way to school. The only difference was once I got these Charlie Parker records, one record was Charlie Parker with strings, If I Should Lose You and Just Friends, and the other record was the blues, Au Revoir and Star Eyes. But I was listening so much and trying to sing at the same time that I could sing Charlie Parker's solos. And I attribute that to the way I play today. I was just lucky that I could hear those kinds of phrasings. And I attribute that to being able to listen to Charlie Parker at a young age.
Incredible.
It did change my life.
Yeah. Wow. Anyone else want to share any connections you feel that you have to the music of Charlie Parker?
Yeah, I was very fortunate because, working with Art Blakey, it was the band of the century, Billy Eckstine, Art Blakey, and Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie, and Sarah Vaughan, and a bunch of those people were playing together. Those was like the bebop revolution. And I think playing with Art, and then playing with Max right after Art. Max Roach was a part of that bebop revolution. And for me, like I said, I always felt I was playing catch up, so I could learn. I was learning from those masters. So, and I gotta say, when I was in high school, somebody put on a scratchy old '78 of Charlie Parker. And I hate to say it, I hate to admit it, but I said, take that off. What is that? And it's weird. I can't imagine that today. I mean, maybe it was the sound of the record, but I didn't get it. But it took time listening and playing with people. Then I got to play. I got to play with Sonny Rollins and those guys and Dexter Gordon. That was part. Dexter was like, he would say, "That's my son." Nuke, he's my son. Train, he's my son. And Dex was a part of that band as well, and part of that revolution, that connection. But before that, I got to play with Dizzy. So when I played with Dizzy, that was the roots of this music, of this school, of that revolution, of that concept of music. So all the time, I always felt like my life has been like a learning experience. So getting to play with and Roy Haynes as well. And I know you've seen a lot of pictures of Roy with Charlie Parker. But all those great musicians, and every step of the way, there was a period when I was working with Joe Henderson and Freddie Hubbard where I was using a lot of electronic pianos, like Fender Rhodes. But when I started playing with Dexter, it's like I threw all those away. Going back to the piano, not the acoustic piano because it doesn't need a qualifier, to the piano. And playing with Dexter, I mean, not just playing music, but being in his presence and hanging out with him because we'd sit on the plane together and he'd tell me all kinds of stories about the territorial bands. And his growing up, his guy was Prez. Lester Young was his guy. So I got to learn, firsthand from Dexter, from Dizzy, from Max, from Art Blakey, from all these wonderful musicians, these masters, these guys who changed the music. So for me, that's who maybe, Dexter always figured like, he would say, "I'm your father." And, in a way, he was right. I didn't like him saying that at first, but, musically, I think, and I'd played with a lot of people before then, but there's something about Dexter and his magnetism, his personality, his concept, his musical. He was like, musically, he was bigger than life, really. So that that relationship there was something that really changed my life, and I think you know, we're still all connected to Charlie Parker, to Dizzy, to Bud Powell, to Richie Powell, to those guys who made this music what it is.
Anyone else want to draw connections between Charlie Parker and his influence, really?
Well, I think he's at the root of everything we do. I mean, these guys walk things back better than I can, but he's at the root of everything we do. Everything that's developed came from him outward. The one member of this band who's probably the biggest proponent is Donald Harrison. And I don't know if I 100% agree with this, but he basically always says, like, you don't need anything else. Charlie Parker is everything. It's everything he says he needs. And, you know, he might be a more modern player per se, but, I mean, you can hear Charlie Parker all over. I mean, he's at the root of everything we do. When I first got started playing, the most important thing I did was bought something called the Charlie Parker Omni book, which was a book of his solos. And that was it. I mean, you know, there was your explanation. You want to know what jazz was? There it was. And even playing through that book for a couple of weeks even just gave you the basic understanding you needed to take off and do this thing.
Yeah.
And that's still true. Still
Yeah.
true.
Of course, this Saturday, in case you didn't know, the cookers, and they are cooking because I got a little sneak peek of the rehearsal today. Saturday, Marcus Garvey Park, be there. They are on stage. Donald Harrison will be there. He wasn't able to get here today, but he will be there. So they'll be all together on Saturday, Marcus Garvey Park, from 3 to 7 p.m.
Yep.
I would suggest getting there probably 1:30, 2 o'clock to get your seat, because you're going to want to be in the place. I do want to leave, if no one else has any comments there, you let me know.
Ask if they got questions or something.
Yeah, I wanted to leave a little bit of time if you all have any questions for any of these amazing men here. Now is the time, as Charlie Parker would say. Now's the time.
Now's the time.
Yes, yes, I'll come to you.
From the older musicians that you may have interacted with during your careers, were there any special Charlie Parker, not quite stories, but advice that they passed along? Because the elders that you interacted with when you were younger might have seen Charlie in some way.
Anybody?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I was just reading the other day about that. I can't give you the quote, but it's a good paraphrase. It's about learn everything you can, study, learn to read, learn everything, and then when you go to play, forget it. Just forget it and play. You know what I mean? So you learn, basically, you learn what you're supposed to do. Get your craft together as best you can, the best way you can. Do that inside and out. And when you play, you're supposed to know that so well, so you don't have to think about what's next, what chord is, how this, will I go from here to there? But that be organic. In other words, that's a paraphrasing of Charlie. But that, I think, is one great message for playing music. Is not, you know, not about the mechanics, it's about the music.
Anyone else? Any questions?
Saw the band a couple of years ago down in Tompkins Square Park for the Charlie, as part of the, and I just want to say thank you for coming uptown.
That was, shit, that was 2010, I think. It's been a minute.
That's a couple of years.
It's a long walk uptown, apparently.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, really, for sharing this space and time with all of us. We are so blessed to have you all, and really the legacy that you all have and are leaving to others, the next generation, really, of musicians. You all are that link between Charlie Parker and those musicians that have gone on to the music of today. So I just want to thank you for that, for the way you're continuing to pour into the jazz of today, really. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for being here. The 31st year of the Charlie Parker Jazz Festival is right now, Friday through Sunday. It's happening. So absolutely free to the public, as Ryan mentioned. Definitely come out and support and see the cookers on Saturday. Thank you guys so much. Have a great night. Ryan, did you want to say any last words? Or are you good? All right. Thank you, Keanna. You're welcome. Yeah. Thanks for having me.